Welcome back to Economic Outlook. Today I want to continue my discussion of oil depletion by examining the production histories of several individual countries. This is useful before looking at aggregate global production to help spot anomalies or discontinuities in the data. We'll start with the United Kingdom and Norway, which saw their production explode after discoveries in the North Sea made both countries major global oil producers. In the early 1970s, exploration revealed petroleum in the North Sea. Most experts agreed that the area was an unlikely place to find hydrocarbon reserves. As these production graphs show, both the UK and Norway rapidly developed their oil resources. Both countries encouraged quick deployment of advanced extraction technology. This policy had two consequences. Both nations became important global suppliers. However, the rapid extraction also depleted the resource base more quickly. Today, both Norway and the United Kingdom appear to have reached their peak production levels in the late 1990s. While Norway and the United Kingdom are past their peak productive capacities, China, Mexico, and Canada have more optimistic futures. All three countries rapidly developed their oil reserves in the 1970s and are major global producers today. Mexico has a long history of oil production dating from just after World War II. Growing demand and improved technology created astounding gains in production. As you can see, the country quintupled its output in less than a decade from 1973 to 1982. Then, production grew another 20% over the next 20 years, before we saw small declines after 2004. This presents an important question and demonstrates the utility of linearization. Is the recent decline in Mexican production an anomaly, or is it a sign that the country's production has reached its peak? I will explore these questions in the next section when I look at Mexico's linearization analysis. Much like Mexico, China has a production history which includes an exponential growth in output in the 1970s as China became more integrated in the global economy. China's case is unique because it has shown almost continuous growth since 1968. China is expected to be a leading consumer of petroleum as its economy continues to expand. Securing stable domestic supplies of petroleum is a key challenge for China's leaders. Linearization will help determine China's potential as an oil producer, and the country will demonstrate some of the model's limitations. Canada is another country which has shown increased production every year since a temporary peak in 1973. Canada's supply capacity is especially important for the United States. The US imports more oil from Canada than any other country, including Saudi Arabia. And Canada also presents unique challenges for linearization. The country has vast non-traditional reserves like oil sands. Currently, these projects are less economical than traditional drilling. However, as the price of oil increases, they become more viable. Is it possible to account for these reserves in the critical URR estimates for linearization? When we look at Canada specifically in the linearization section, we'll try to answer these questions. Another major oil producer to emerge as the United States declined in production is Russia. Unfortunately, its production history is difficult to decipher, but its importance to the global economy makes it deserve intense scrutiny. Until the late 1980s, Russia was the world's largest producer, in both real and relative terms. But from 1988 to 1995, Russia's production fell to less than half of its former peak value, as you can see in this chart. This decline wasn't permanent, though. Production has increased every year since 1998, and now equals 2/3 of its peak value. Russian oil companies have faced a lot of challenges, including waves of privatization and nationalization. The country proves almost impossible to model using linearization because of the uncertainty surrounding its reserves in URR. It's unfortunate that we know so little about Russia's oil reserves and depletion levels. With the exception of Saudi Arabia, no other country is more important to the world's energy supplies. My final charts in the closing section will try to put some visualization around Russia's strategic position as it relates to other oil producers and for the globe's productive capacity. Declining production in the United States also paved the way for OPEC to rise to global prominence. First, we'll look at the United Arab Emirates. The UAE is the most stable producer of the three countries we'll look at here, including Nigeria and Venezuela, and has parlayed its energy resources into the creation of a thriving financial and cultural center in the Middle East. Understanding the depletion of the UAE's oil fields is critical for internal planners and for international business leaders who view the region as a hub for commerce. Nigeria produces approximately the same amount of oil each year as the United Arab Emirates, but in a much more politically divisive climate. The country lives with the threat of militant attacks and has questionable election processes. It is tempting to stereotype Nigeria as a violent and unstable area, but this characterization is really an oversimplification. Nigeria is the 8th most populous country in the world and has an enviable record of economic growth and a rich cultural history. Leaders and policymakers within and outside of Nigeria need to understand its energy resources to create successful public policy to help foster stabilization in the country. Another important oil producer is, of course, Venezuela. Venezuela has one of the longest histories of oil production in the world, but the political climate in the country has spawned volatile production figures, and linearization is basically impossible because of the uncertainty around the country's URR and its capricious drilling and extraction. Venezuela's troubled history is well documented elsewhere, so I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it here. However, we will look at Venezuela's linearization analysis to show just how badly linearization can work if the inputs into the model are imprecise. The final beneficiary of the United States' decline in production were major Middle Eastern producers like Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait, although smaller countries like Qatar and Yemen have benefited as well. Iran was one of the world's most important producers in the early 1970s. However, revolution and political tension have dampened production since 1978. Despite political turmoil and its horrific wars with Iraq, the country has managed to grow production each year since 1981, and it remains an important global supplier. Unfortunately, its scattered production history makes the country's linearization analysis a poor basis for comparison and decision-making. The same issue occurs in Iraq and Kuwait. Wars have disrupted production for both of these producers, and linearization is less accurate. Finally, no discussion of the world's oil production is complete without, of course, talking about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's reputation as the world's most important oil producer is well deserved. And for many years, Saudi Arabia has served as the world's swing producer. This means that Saudi Arabia has spare capacity which can meet demand increases in the short term. Other countries lack either the capacity to produce more oil or the political conditions to permit it. In the past, Saudi Arabia has been the one producer which has been able to bring extra supply into the market to stabilize prices and calm fears of demand imbalance. Saudi Arabia's status as a swing producer also means that its ability to increase production in the medium to long term is vital to global economic growth projections. As Saudi Arabia's singular importance demands extra scrutiny, and this is especially true for the crown jewel of Saudi Arabian production, the magnificent Ghawar field. Ghawar is unique for its size and its characteristics. The quality of oil and ease of extraction is unmatched around the world. Most experts believe that once the Ghawar field has reached its peak productive capacity, the rest of the world has probably also reached its peak. Unfortunately, it's difficult to find credible information about Ghawar. In the next section, I will examine Saudi Arabia's production as a whole and the Ghawar field in particular. The results will show the probability that Saudi Arabia can maintain its status as a swing producer. It will also reveal whether or not common growth scenarios are feasible for Saudi Arabian production. In my next entry, I will use the production figures you've seen here to construct linearization models for all of the major producers in the world. I will also discuss the limitations of the model and then apply the model to the world's oil production to figure out whether or not we're close to a global peak. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.